And we welcome you to United in Liberty Radio, where we discuss all things principle, where we discuss the proper role of government and how to debate and have discussions with those within your community regarding principles rather than emotion.
You hate monger.
You know,
Debate?
debate.
I don't think you can use those type of words.
I like debate. I like, it's constructive arguing.
Well, I think that's better than debate.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I
Debate's
like
a harsh
I just like
hatred
the way
word.
debate sounds, because there's a winner and a loser in a debate.
You know what I'm getting sick of, Joe? I'm getting sick of every single time there's an argument out there, the left, instead of answering the question, turns around and starts talking about hatred. That's what everything that's brought up in principle all of a sudden turns to, well, they're just hate mongers. And, you know, you hear that term flipped around a lot by conservative talk radio. And you don't hear it on the other side as much as far as the liberals go. But what I'm saying by that is when someone says you're a hate monger, I don't think they're actually saying you're a hate monger. But the language that they use to describe what you're talking about, they might as well be saying that term.
Well, I mean, that's not the only one that they throw out there. I mean, racist is a big one. That's one that's really popular. That strikes an emotional chord with nobody wants to be called a racist. So, that's one that feels bad to be on the receiving end of. But the one that throws out the racist comment, the race baiting, or the hate monger speech or the rhetoric, they're on the side of emotion. They're not on the side of principle.
Right.
And that's why I like the debate, because there's a winner and there's a loser.
Right.
And so that's it's nice to be able to have a discussion and a debate and deal with principles, as opposed to just having these arguments and these fights where it's just all about emotion. Nothing gets solved. You walk away hating each other. At least with a debate, and you're using or you're articulating principles, you at least have the option, or the opportunity rather, to win over the other side.
Right. And to be honest with you, that is fun to be involved in that, to watch that, because you see arguments on both sides that actually are meaningful arguments. This morning I watched a clip from Howard Dean. I don't know if you caught this, but he was teaching a class. I guess it's Professor Dean now.
Howard Dean?
Howard Dean, yeah, the yeehaw Howard Dean, if you'll remember that lovely outburst during his campaign for president. But he was in Australia or Austria, one of those A words, and he was acting like an A word when he was discussing how to debate. And basically, and I should have pulled up the clip, but I wasn't honestly planning on talking about this today, but he basically was teaching, if they ask you about A, you answer B. In other words, if they ask you about abortion and you don't want to talk about abortion, you turn to them and say, well, you know what, that's a really great question, but we're not here to talk about abortion. We're here to talk about jobs. And let me tell you what the Democrats are doing when it comes to jobs. Exactly right. And if they want to talk about mosques, you say, hey, you know what, that's a great debate that's being engaged in the United States of America right now, but we're here to talk about jobs. And let me tell you what this president is doing for jobs. Wow. I mean, that's the kind of crap that's going on. In other words, we're not having meaningful debate. We're basically the bait and switch, where if you want to talk to me about A, well, you know what, we're going to talk about B. Sorry, we're not going to have that debate.
What if I said to him, well, I know we're talking about jobs, but the question I have for you is, and I'm acknowledging that we're talking about something else, but I'm also acknowledging we're going off topic here for a minute.
That's funny.
Because,
throw it back at him.
Because you work for me. And you're on my dime.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, and
probably would call me racist after that.
There's a huge debate going on. Speaking of racist, speaking of rhetoric that's being thrown around on this program for a couple weeks in a row, we talked about the mosque being.
You wore a mosque.
I was going to bring it tonight, but I didn't want to scare you again.
Okay.
But, this debate's been going back and forth, of course, in the news. It's heavily debated over the past few weeks. I thought it was interesting, Joe. I don't know if you caught this, but speaking of Joe, on the MSNBC program Morning Joe, speaking of course, Joe Scarborough, which they claim he's a conservative. I would differ with that, but
I don't know.
I'm not going to go there today. But he was not on the show. Joe was not on Morning Joe, so I guess it was Morning Mika, which is his lovely co-host. Anyway, they were talking about the mosque. This is actually on September 10th. I just saw it today, come across the wires. But on September 10th, they were talking about the mosque, and they were talking about it with none other than real estate mogul Donald Trump. And, of course, Donald knows a little bit about New York real estate, just a touch about New York real estate. And, of course, they had him on the program. They're talking about this mosque. And one of the things that had occurred, and to be honest with you, I've been kind of out of it. I've been involved in other things over the last couple of weeks, and I haven't been in the news as much as I usually am. But I guess what had happened was in order to help solve this problem, Donald Trump offered to buy the site that the mosque was to be built upon and ask that individual to move the mosque a few blocks away. I thought that was brilliant. You'll remember that, and I'm speaking to the listeners here, you'll remember that Joe and I were talking for a couple of weeks about this mosque thing and saying that, we're really missing the boat when we talk about the emotion and we talk about all the people that died on September 11th and the fact that it was, quote-unquote, Islamic terrorists that had done this and how insensitive that they build it there. And I agree. I agree completely with the emotion that it probably should not be built there. But what we were talking about was, do they have the right to build there? Because most people, and this is what happens with so many things out there. You take good care of your lawn, and you take good care of your property, and you're worried about how it looks to the neighbors, and that you have a nice curb appeal, and then some joker moves in next to you, and he puts the car without tires up on blocks in his front yard. He's got the toilet planter out front. I love those, by the way. When you take an old toilet and you have a second use for it when you plant a flower. I think that's cool. And he puts the old refrigerator out there, and he doesn't mow the lawn, and the weeds start to grow, and things start to go down. And so instead of taking care of it like a neighbor would, you pick up the phone and call the police and turn the guy in. Okay, this happens there ought to be a law. Happens all the time in the United States of America, and that's what's happening here with the mosque. People don't want it built there. I agree. I don't want it built there either. But do you run to Big Brother and then say there ought to be a law? Kick them out. Tell them they can't do it. The zoning fits, I understand. It's a religious mosque, I understand, but they can't do that. There ought to be a law.
Well, the problem with advocating for that is that what if you were on the wrong end of your own law at one point in time? What if maybe you're a practicing Catholic and you decide that you don't want that mosque there because you had several relatives that lost their lives in the World Trade Center because of the bombing and what took place on September 11th, and so you're going to go ahead and rely on the emotion and hold to the individual that is building the mosque and say you don't want it there, and I could completely understand the emotion behind it. Don't get me wrong. However, looking at the principle of the thing, what if you advocate for and get some type of law passed that now that religious building or a religious building can't be in that location, and then a year from now, some Catholic decides they want to put a church there. Well, guess what? You created a law that no religious building can be there in that location. Now you're personally affected. When you start advocating for government to start imposing restrictions, those restrictions, while you may be on the right side of that restriction at the moment, you will find yourself on the wrong side of that restriction eventually, because one restriction will always impose, or creating a restriction will also create an additional problem.
Right, unintended consequences.
Yeah, then you have to create a further restriction or alter that restriction to be able to fix that problem.
Right,
which
I didn't
then
really mean
creates
it.
The next problem.
Exactly.
And then before you know it, what you wanted or what you ended up with was nothing like what you originally wanted. And really, what people don't want is they just don't want the mosque there. I don't think they care if there's a mosque. Because really, do we want to close every single mosque across the country? No, that's not what people are saying. They just